So, India's labor system. It's huge, it's complicated, and right now it's going through one of the biggest shakeups in its history. I mean, we're talking about a total rewrite of the rules that govern work for millions of people. So, what's actually changing? Let's break it down.
Okay, so to really get what's happening, you've got to understand the before picture. For decades, labor law in India was like this giant tangled maze. Imagine trying to navigate 29 different central laws, and every single one had its own set of rules, its own definitions. Yeah, it was a mess, super complex and confusing for pretty much everyone, employers and employees alike.
Now imagine taking a wrecking ball to that whole complicated machine, because that's pretty much what just happened. The old system, gone, completely taken apart to build something totally new, something way simpler, from the ground up. And here's what we're left with. Those 29 laws, they've been boiled down into just 4 new, streamlined codes. The big idea here is to create a single, modern set of rules for work in India. So let's dive in and see what these 4 codes are all about. Right, so you might be wondering, how did it get so complicated to begin with? Well, it comes down to a really important detail in India's constitution. Labor is on what's called the concurrent list. And what that means, in simple terms, is that both the main central government and all the different state governments could make their own labor laws. You can just imagine the chaos, right? It created this crazy patchwork of different rules all over the country. The new codes, they're designed to finally clean up all that ambiguity. Okay, so what's the big picture here? How should we think about this whole overhaul? Well, it's really all about 2 main goals. Think of it like a high-wire balancing act, between what businesses need and what workers need. And this quote really just nails the whole idea behind it. On one side, you've got making it easier for companies to do their thing, to operate, to grow, the whole ease of doing business idea. And on the other side, it's about making things better and more standardized for employees. So keep that balancing act in your head, because pretty much every single change we're about to talk about ties back to one of those 2 goals.
All right, so here are the 4 new codes we're going to walk through. First up, we'll talk about the money, the code on wages. Then we'll get into the dynamics between employers and unions with the Industrial Relations Code. After that, it's all about the safety net, the Social Security Code. And finally, we'll look at the actual workplace itself with the Occupational Safety, Health, and Working Conditions Code, or just the OSH Code for short.
All right, let's kick things off with what matters to pretty much everyone, your paycheck and your security. These first couple of codes really shake things up when it comes to how wages work and who's covered by Social Security. So, the code on wages, this one is all about bringing some much-needed clarity. For starters, we now have one single definition of wages for everybody. That gets rid of all the confusion from different states having different rules. Then, there's the new national floor wage. You can think of it like a baseline. No state can set its minimum wage any lower than this floor. And this is huge. Minimum wage now applies to all sectors, not just a handful of them like before. Oh, and if you're working overtime, your pay has to be at least double your normal rate. Period. Okay, now this next part is a really big deal, especially for the modern economy. For the very first time, the law actually defines and recognizes gig workers and platform workers. Yeah, we're talking about your food delivery drivers, the people driving for ride-sharing apps, that whole world. Just by putting them in the law, the government's taking a massive first step towards bringing this huge part of the workforce under the Social Security umbrella. And it's not just about a definition on paper. The code actually sets up a new Social Security fund specifically for them. And get this, both the government and the companies, the platforms themselves, have to contribute to it. And speaking of worker security, there's another really important update here for folks on fixed-term contracts. They used to have to wait 5 years to get their gratuity payment. Now, they're eligible after just 1 year. That's a huge change. That puts them on a much more level playing field with permanent employees. All right, next up, the Industrial Relations Code. And this is where we get into some of the most hotly debated stuff: hiring, firing, and the role of unions. Remember that balancing act we mentioned? Well, this is where it gets really, really interesting. So, is this the start of a new era of hiring and firing? That's the big question, right? It sparked a ton of debate. Does it give companies the flexibility they need, or does it make jobs feel less secure for workers? And this comparison shows you exactly what's changed. Before, if a company had 100 or more workers, it needed to get the government's permission before any layoffs. Now, that number has been bumped up to 300. So the thinking is, this gives more companies the freedom to adjust their workforce as the market changes, without having to jump through a bunch of bureaucratic hoops.
The rules around strikes are also changing pretty significantly. For one, the notice period before a strike is now 60 days. The idea is to give everyone more time to talk things out. And the definition of what counts as a strike is now broader. It even includes things like mass leave. When a bunch of people call in sick at once, it closes a loophole. And for union negotiations, a single union will be recognized as the sole negotiator as long as it has over half the workers, 51% backing it.
Okay, last but not least, let's talk about the OSHA Code. This one is all about safety and health, basically the day-to-day conditions in the workplace. It covers everything from safety rules to some really basic rights that everyone should have. This code has a bunch of modern updates, and there's something in it for both employees and employers. For employees, for example, women can now work night shifts, but only with their consent and with safety measures in place. Employers also have to provide mandatory health checkups. And this one's really important. Every single worker has to get a formal appointment letter and regular salary slips. It's a huge step for transparency. And for businesses, well, things get simpler with a single registration process, which should cut down on paperwork. Okay, so we've walked through all 4 codes. Let's zoom out. What's the big takeaway here? What does all this mean when you put it together? At the end of the day, this whole thing is a massive attempt to take that old, complicated puzzle of 29 laws and replace it with one single, unified system. It's all about trying to find that new balance, right? Making India an easier place to run a business while also making sure that its huge workforce has modern protections and a fair deal. So, the laws are on the books, but how this all plays out in the real world, well, that story is just getting started. And it leaves us with a big question. Will this massive simplification project actually balance the scales? Will it create a system that works for both the companies driving the economy and the millions of people who actually do the work? The answer to that won't be found in Parliament. It'll be found in the workplaces across India.